As all of you know, Nayanta Conversations is a series where we have conversations with leaders from different walks of life. Past Nayanta Conversations have been with people like Chris Gopalakrishnan, Bimal Patel, the architect, Ranjan, the astrophysicist, more recently Kiran Sethi, the educator, Satish Reddy. And today we are very happy to have with us Farhad Forbes, the co-chairman of Forbes Marshall, somebody who's been a global leader and a champion for Family Business Network International. He's been the co-chair of CII's Western Region Group on
family
affirmative action as well as family business. And I both had a chance to work. He's also a co-founder of Nayanta, and I've had a chance to work with him. I was originally interviewed by him, and it's a pleasure to have this conversation with you, and I'm looking forward to this conversation. I did take the liberty of speaking to some of the Forbes Marshall participants in our program, and one of the things that everybody talks about is your empathy, how patient you are, how you listen well, how you carry people along. So he's wondering who said that. Okay. So
and my wife is in the audience.
Yeah. Okay. So she now knows that you're patient and listen well. So yeah. So somebody once told my wife that he listens very well at work, and she said strictly at work. So it's like, yeah. But it's a pleasure to be having this conversation. And I thought, this is an exploration of work, but it's also an exploration of a journey. So maybe if you could start by talking a bit about your early childhood formative influences, including at home, at school in India, and then we'll pick it up from there.
Firstly, thank you very much. And thank you, Ranjan. It's always been a pleasure to come to some of the Nayanta programs. I had the opportunity to be part of some of the programs earlier as well. And I fully reciprocate what Ranjan said about our earlier interactions. I have great respect for what's being done at Nayanta, and it's really a pleasure to be associated with it as a first opening comment. I think many of you, in fact, all of you, have interacted a lot with Naushad, and in the program as well. And you also had a chance to be at Forbes Marshall today. So I think you have a little bit of background about the history, the company, etc. But what's not up there is some of the personal stuff which Ranjan asked me to say. So I'm 4.5 years older than Naushad. I happen to be married as well, which he's not. And I have my wife here, my daughter Ria, and son-in-law Aaron. They're also here. And I think our son Darius is joining remotely. He's not in Pune at present. Naushad and I grew up in Bombay. We were born in Bombay. Our parents are from Bombay. And I lived in Bombay till I was about 12 years old in the 7th standard. And then we moved to Pune. And maybe you've heard this before, but we had our sales office, our head office, our business office based in Bombay. And when we created the factory, our father created the factory in Pune because we could get much more land than we would have. We would have got land somewhere, even at that time, somewhere at, I think, Andheri or Vikhroli. And our father felt it would be much better to, be in Pune. The facility which you visited today, you will find hard to believe, but it was in complete farming community. There were fields there. There were no buildings. The only building that you could see from our factory was CME, the College of Military Engineering. And there was, I think Kirloskar oil engines existed when we came in there. Hindustan Antibiotics was there, and one or two other factories. We moved to Pune in 1968, in early 1968. And we both went to school in Pune. I finished my school at Bishop School. We both were at Bishop School. And then I spent a year at Wadia College. At that time, you had to do a kind of bridge year because we did the ISC program at Bishop's at that time.
Which was 11 standards.
It was 11 standards. And by the time Naushad finished, it was 10 plus 2. But we were in the era of the 11 standards. And after that, you had to do one more year in college before you went to a regular university. So before you went into a regular university program, a 3-year bachelor's of science or arts or whatever, or for engineering, a 4-year program. So I did the 1 year at Wadia College. And then after that, went to Pune Engineering College for my first year. And in that first year, it's a common year. It was a general year where you studied everything. And then at the end of that year, you had to choose which line of engineering you wanted to do.
So Pune Engineering College had a foundation at that time.
Yes. So Pune Engineering had that 1-year foundation. Actually, I did also do the entrance exam for IIT. I got into IIT Bombay before that, but I got electrical engineering and I got civil engineering. And I was absolutely set that I would like to do electronics. The only electronics was possible at Kharagpur. And our parents were a little hesitant of sending me at that time to Kharagpur across the country. So I'm sorry if any Bengalis here, nothing to say about being in Bengal, but that was the concern. And this, keep in mind, this was 1973. So I went to Pune Engineering. I went to Wadia College and then Pune Engineering. And then in my first year, I had to also choose. So I chose electronics, and they had only, I think, 10 or 12 seats at that time. And you had to list your preferences, and I listed one. And then when the form was given and they told me, they said, you need to put others. What if you don't get this? I said, no, it doesn't matter. I will try it next year, And fortunately, I got it. Okay, I was able to get it. But it was around that time that I also had discussions in the family with particularly our father, who said, well, why don't you also look at universities overseas? And we always thought we would go to university overseas for graduate school. He says, why don't we look at it even now? And that's when I started exploring. And at that time, there was no internet, no email, none of that. So there was the United States Information Service in Bombay on Marine Lines. And there they had all the catalogs of all the US universities. And so I spent a day there just going through those catalogs and seeing which universities appealed. And what appealed to me, I wrote down. And what really appealed to me, I looked at Stanford at that time. And I was very impressed. Why? Because it had an excellent engineering program. It had a very fine electrical engineering program. They called it electronics. There was electrical engineering. And at the same time, I could read, even at that time, about how the university professed liberal values, liberal education, the importance of the humanities, and having a well-rounded educational experience. And so that stuck in my mind. And so that's what actually drove me to say that, well, let me see if I should start applying. So I applied, but it was too late in the year for me to be considered that year. This was in March, and entering in September was too late. So they said you can apply as a transfer student next year as well. So I said I'll consider that. And then, as a matter of coincidence, because our mother was very active with an organization called the Pune Music Society, which used to get artists from overseas to come and perform in Pune. And it had a very, very, one of the characteristics of Pune Music Society at that time was that it had very, very low budget. And they had no funds to host these artists at hotels and all, as they do today. And so they used to put the artists with host families. And so we had this Hungarian harpist, he used to play the harp. And he came and stayed with us. And he stayed with us not just for the day of the concert, but he stayed with us for 2 days before, over the weekend. And we were talking, and he used to also, besides being a concert artist where he performed, he also taught music. He taught music at New York University, and he taught music at the University of Bridgeport in Connecticut. And so we were talking, and he says, are you at all interested in coming to the US? And I said, yes. And he was a Hungarian immigrant. He ran away during the 1956 invasion. Well, actually, the whole thing which happened with the Soviet Union, when they invaded into and suppressed the dissent there. And so he said, well, why don't you? I told him, I said, I've written to all these universities and, it's too late to apply this year. But he said, well, listen, I teach at the University of Bridgeport. They have a good engineering program. It's a small university. And I think they may not have closed their admissions yet. And so he took my transcripts and all. And we went to the US that year in May. And it was like a holiday. It was our father had business there, and during that time, we also accompanied him. This was in 1974. And when we were in New York, we actually visited the university. My father and I took the train, and we visited the University of Bridgeport. We went to the electrical engineering program. We went to the department. We met the chair. And he said, I was impressed with him. He appealed to me. And he said, if you are willing, we would be happy to have you. And you can start this year. And on the train back from Bridgeport to New York, my father and I decided that, yes, let's do it. And then I never came back for 4.5 years. Because at that time, it was very difficult to travel, for one thing. We also had the emergency, which happened soon after,
76, yeah.
Very soon after. And there was always that concern that, if I came back, if I would not be able to go back again. And, with the education system being what it is here at that time, that I said, well, would they readmit me here? And there was all that uncertainty and question. And so we all decided that it's better that I graduate and only then come back. And so that's actually how it happened. And during that time, I spent 1 year at the University of Bridgeport. And I was clear that at that time, I would transfer the next year. And so then I finally decided to apply to 2 universities, University of California at Berkeley, and then at Stanford. And fortunately, I got into both, and I decided to go to Stanford. So that's a little bit about the time that I went to university.
And you did both a master's in engineering at Stanford and then a master's in management.
Yes, but that was much later.
The management was much later.
So actually what happened was I did my bachelor's in electrical engineering. I finished that. It was 2 years because my junior and senior year. And I then stayed on and got my master's in electrical engineering as well. And that's in fact, that year when I finished my bachelor's and I did my master's, and I had my master's over a year and a half because I had an assistantship at that time. So it took you 5 quarters instead of, I think, 3 quarters. And Naushad arrived as well. So we were both together at that time. And then I worked for Hewlett Packard. So I finished my electrical engineering degree. I got my master's. And at that time, for electrical engineering, place to go was HP, Hewlett Packard. Among others also. I interviewed at Intel and a few other places, and I had a few offers. I was fortunate at that time. And I decided to go to Hewlett Packard. And I was with them then for about, I think, almost 3 years, 2.5 years or so. And then came back after that. And I did my master's in management about 10 years after I did I had about 10 years of work experience before going back to Stanford for my master's.
So I'll come to Stanford vis-a-vis schooling here, but both your mother and your father, I think, were very strong influences. So in your formative years, how do you think each of them has shaped you?
I think most fundamentally was in values. I think Naushad, I can speak for Naushad on this too, I think. But both of us were very, very fortunate to have parents who challenged us, encouraged us to excel. They impressed on us the importance of working hard, doing well at school. But most importantly was what we observed in how they related to other people. And our father was a great influence on us in terms of how he did that. So he was very demanding about what was necessary to be done at work. But at the same time, we saw a very human dimension in how he made time for people, all people. He knew the names of all the people on the shop floor. Not only did he knew the names of the people on the shop floor, he knew many of the family members. And his door, at that time they had cabins. It was not the open office which you saw today. But his door was always open. And we would see with him, there would be his colleagues, his co-directors in the company, but there were people who came in from the shop floor. They wanted to talk to him about a loan for a house, or that they had a problem in the family and what they were struggling with. And we observed this. And I think those were great influences on us. And our mother's interests, in other things, like for example, music. I think both of us have imbibed our love for classical music through her. So I think those really were great influences in our lives. And when I was in the US, those 4.5 years when I could not come back, and the only form of communication was letters. You could make a phone call, but you had to book a call. You couldn't dial it yourself. And you got a 3-minute call. And it was $4 a minute at that time. So phone calls were far and few, But my parents, each of them wrote a letter to me and then later to Naushad as well, every week. And I would spend my Friday evening responding to the letter which I got that week. And they would keep me informed of what was going on socially in Pune, but a lot about work, about what was going on in the company, what were some of the struggles that they were having as well. And those were very, very valuable, valuable in terms of making me understand and appreciate and keeping the connection with things back home.
So, this is the third conversation in sequence where I have noticed the importance of accidents and the opportunities that accidents create.
Oh, yeah.
So it actually turns out that if the Pune Music Society had more money,
right,
your career might have been different.
Absolutely right. Absolutely right. That's the paradox of it,
Yeah.
So it actually was very helpful to me,
Yeah, and of course there is family generosity and a whole bunch of things there. Could you comment on the school education that you experienced in India and the education that you experienced first at Bridgeport and then at Stanford and what you saw?
Yeah. So I think we were fortunate that, at least I was very fortunate in school, that we had very good teachers, and there were two teachers who influenced me a great deal in school. One was my English teacher. He also happened to be our class teacher. And the other was my maths teacher. And the maths teacher was from Kerala. People had difficulty understanding him, but he really taught us the rigor of, geometry, coordinate geometry, trigonometry, because we did higher maths as in preparation for engineering at that time. And I really got my foundation in mathematics from him, and then subsequently at Wadia College when I had another professor there who helped build on that. And then our English teacher, who really taught us values. And he encouraged us to read and to, he would talk about what's happening in the world, and he would encourage us to read the newspaper. At that time, we read newspapers too. So, and read the op-eds, he would tell us. Read the op-eds, So in break time and all, we'd go to the library and we would pick up the newspaper and read that. And then he would ask us, what did you read? What did you see? So they influenced me a great deal, the two of them. And then subsequently, we had a very good professor of mathematics at Wadia College. I think some of you are from Pune would even know the name, Professor Mugat. He was a great influence and quite a legend in terms of mathematics education in Pune. And then, of course, at the universities, I found University of Bridgeport quite easy in the sense that in terms of the academics were easy. But there was a big cultural adjustment to living in the US. It was the first time that I was actually away from home. So in a way, it was good to have that relatively having the academics easy, but then using the time to adjust to culture, adjust to way things were done. I was shocked in the US to see the students, putting their feet on the tables and calling the professors by their first names. And, it was very different, So you learn how to adjust to that too. And then, of course, at Stanford, it was again very different because I was we were fortunate to be a reasonably good student in school here in Pune as well. And when you're at the top of your class, among the top of your class, and then you go to an institution like Stanford, and you quickly realize that there are a lot more smarter people in this room than you are. And it sort of makes you also understand a little bit. You become much more humble when that happens. And you also understand how much more there is to learn. Yeah. So that was the main difference. Yeah. As far as that's concerned.
Pedagogy?
Yes. And also, I think the main thing which I experienced at Stanford was it checked all the boxes on what I was looking for in terms of excellent electronics, electrical engineering, and engineering instruction, but also the social sciences, the humanities. I mean, reading, I mean, you're experiencing this in this program, I'm sure. But, reading some of the humanities and the texts, reading Dante and, the Inferno, and it was totally kind of new for me to do that. And the way the teachers were teaching us, the professors were teaching us, you had all kinds of professors. You had professors who were really top of their field and they knew it and they showed it. But you also had professors who were super bright, extremely accomplished, and with complete humility. And you see both and you learn from both. But you learn other things from the ones who are also, make time for you as a student. They profess to not have all the answers. And those were things which also are for me, it was extremely important to learn that too.
So I think one can say fairly that you all are now a Stanford family.
Yeah.
What was it about Stanford that created that kind of loyalty that encouraged so many family members to go back?
So I think you should ask Naushad that question. But I think for Naushad, it was a little more kind of, because I was already there.
Yeah.
It was probably quite logical that he would come there too. And yes, we could have explored other things, but I think you didn't actually, right? Or didn't apply elsewhere?
Princeton, Cornell, and Stanford.
You did. Okay, fine. So he did that, right? But he decided to come to Stanford.
But Princeton was a backup school in that case. So.
Yes. And for the next generation, so I think we now have, within the family, I think we have 11 Stanford degrees, I think, between 4 of us. Yeah. And now, no, I should count Aaron. So Aaron's also, he's got 2 degrees from Stanford. So 13 now.
Yeah. So that's what I meant. I mean, I had the data to back me up.
Yeah. So 13. Right. But when Ria's our oldest child. So when she was looking around, I think she was fairly clear that she would go anywhere but Stanford. And you can ask her that. And Ria and I made this trip. She was doing her 11th and 12th grade in UWC in Singapore. And then as part of that, you go and visit some colleges, right? So we made a trip to the US and we visited a number of institutions. We visited Princeton, 8. That's a lot. Yeah, I can't even remember now. But yes, we did the East Coast colleges. We did Princeton, we did Yale, we did Harvard, Columbia, and then NYU, I'm not sure. I don't think we did. And then we went to Chicago, and then we went to the West Coast. And in the West Coast, we did a bunch of colleges too. And then I said, listen, we're here. We should also go to Stanford, right? Let us do one of these, what do they call them? These college tours. And so we did that. And then, of course, things progress. And then she decided that, she was very intrigued by it. And she decided that, but you should ask her that. I mean, it's better that she tells you.
That's a whole another conversation.
Yeah. So you should ask her that. And then Darius, of course, went there too.
No, so what would you take from Stanford that you would want to see at Nayanta? And one thing from Stanford that you would not want to see at Nayanta?
So what I would like to see at Nayanta is certainly what's in your mission statement, about the kind of leaders that you're trying to create.
Responsible leaders and ethical leaders.
And leaders with compassion, you see. So I think that's what I think we're trying to do at Nayanta. And I think that's very true of what I got from Stanford. Now, different people take different things away from institutions like that. And I think particularly we noticed this at the business school because both I was at the business school and so was Ria. And business school education sometimes does not necessarily imbibe the full spirit of those values. But it's up to you to really choose what you take. Yeah? So that's, I think, what I see would be so good to see in what we do with our graduates at Nayanta. What would I not like to see?
I'll tone down the question.
Yeah.
Anything that you think we should do better than Stanford?
Yeah. I think where we can do a lot better. And that is to create leaders who are much more aware of the social problems of the world. When you live in Stanford, for any one of you who visit, is such an idyllic location. It's in this wonderful town of Palo Alto. It's progressive. It has thoughtful residents. By and large, it's sort of changing a bit just now. People are showing their true colors. I think it's coming out, unfortunately, among certain segment of society there. But by and large, at least the time when we were there and when we still very recently, and by and large, it's still true. It's a very nice place to be. And when you come and when you go there, you think the world is like that. And your whole perspective of how you create solutions in whatever field you are tend to be kind of colored by what very smart people around you and thoughtful people by and large are saying and how they think. And they don't have the exposure that we are fortunate to have in a country like ours, and where our students at Nayanta and our exec ed graduates as well have that opportunity. And so you have a much better perspective on what the world needs. And I think that's something which you would not get there.
So a balanced exposure to the world. More or less.
I think so. I feel so. I feel that's something which...
Okay, so I'm going to fast forward this now a little bit. How did the transition back to India and to Forbes Marshall happen? Was that always on the cards? Did it get accelerated?
So I graduated with my master's in electrical engineering in 1979. And one of the things, full credit to our parents, that there was no pressure at all from the family, from my parents at that time, for me to come back. There was pressure from our grandfather. Our mother's father clearly said, you have to come back. Okay. And in fact, he made a trip just about the time that I got my master's when I decided to work at HP. He came to visit us and to actually persuade me to come back. But we had absolutely no pressure from my father. And he would talk to Naushad and me and he said, you should just see what things are and how things are. You're in a very fine country. America was the place for, any graduate of electronics. HP was a great company to work for. And there were great opportunities. So for me, I was not quite sure that I'd come back. I think Naushad was more certain that he would. But I was not so sure. And I had a very positive experience at HP. I worked in R&D in a nice small division, and I learned a lot about how and that was the old HP. So the HP way was a way of working, and Bill Hewlett and David Packard had retired from their positions, but they were very much around, and they used to walk the plants. and just go around and talk to people. And one of the things that the HP way professed was management by walking around. And those were very good things. So the question was that, would I stay on there or would I come back? And there were two events which kind of happened, which sort of made me make the decision to come back. One was that our division of Hewlett-Packard, HP had this philosophy that, if a division got beyond a certain size, they would split it so that, it remained at a relatively small number. So you could maintain the kind of personal relationships and all. So our division remained small. So that was not the reason. But one of the problems they had was to attract young engineers to come and work for Hewlett-Packard because of the cost of housing in California. And even at that time, the cost of housing was much higher than other parts of the country. And so they decided to relocate our division to Colorado. And so we went out to Colorado. They wanted us to all move there. And actually, it was a very beautiful area and all, but a colleague of mine, who was on my same project team, and I decided, no, we should not. We would prefer to be in California. So then they placed us with another division. So one of the colleague went to the computer division, and I went and I had an offer from the sort of microwave division in Santa Rosa. And it was at that time that we had the emergency, and then we had the change in government. And Nani Palkhiwala, some of you may know the name, he was appointed as Indian ambassador to the United States. And he came and gave a talk at Stanford. And I used to still get all the notifications for the talks and all. And so I went to the talk, and he met with some of the Indian students who were there. And he was a very inspiring speaker. And he talked about the emergency, and he talked about how Indira Gandhi was actually booted out of office because of what she did in the emergency. And he made a statement, and he said, India is a country with very poor people. Remember, this is 1979. It was the end of 1979. It's very poor people, but with very rich ideals. And he said, we need bright people. We need people who are thoughtful, people who are intelligent, and who have had the opportunity of great education. And he says, we need y'all to come back. And that stuck in my mind, and you're at that age, you're very idealistic. And if anything, I would say that was one of the triggers. And then, of course, also in 1978, that was the first time I had the opportunity to come back after I left in 74. And we had a chance to also visit the company, see what was happening there. And yes, it was much smaller, but it was doing a lot of the good work in the community, even at that time, in small ways. But we could see the impact that we were having in changing a few lives. So these two things really, listening to Nani Palkhiwala and seeing what was happening, witnessing how, things were being done in the organization and how the organization was impacting the community around us, I think to a very large extent made me decide at that time that this transition for the division moving to Colorado was now the time for me to take the step, because before I got into another project, it would be more difficult to move then. Let me try it. I had nothing to lose. So that is what then brought me.
Forbes Marshall, I think, in my opinion, is one of the examples of a company with a very smooth intergenerational transition and a very kind of well-done transition where the values have transited, the company has grown. Tell us that journey and the how of that journey.
I think again in this, I think we would attribute a lot of that to the way our father inducted us in the business. And of course, the leadership styles are totally different. I mean, our father was much more, he created things, from literally almost from scratch. The whole business was built by him in the early days. So he knew everything. When Naushad and I came back into the company, there was no way that we...
Did you all come back together?
No,
or,
I think
it was
there was
separated.
a few years
so
apart. So, more or less, I think I came back in 1980, started in 82, January, and you were in 86, so 4 years apart. But the same connections and links even while we were away, right? So I would say when I came back, I first started out in R&D, doing things related to R&D, because that's where my expertise was, and I could contribute almost immediately. And what our father would do is that he also exposed us to what was going on. So we'd sit in on some of the meetings, we would listen, we would hear, and he would give us things to do, to look at. And that's the way we started getting kind of into a few things. And then, of course, as we had operational responsibilities, it's not to say you had no disagreements. You had plenty of disagreements. Our father was he had very strong views on how things would be done and should be done. But one thing we truly respected was when he gave us something to do, and if we took a call on it and we took a decision on it, he would disagree. And he would tell us, no, I don't think this will work. I don't think this may work. But he allowed us to try it. And he backed us up fully on that. So even though he disagreed, he never said, I told you so, if it didn't work out. And that was a great source of, I would say, to build our own confidence. And also in a way, in many cases, I think Naushad will agree with me on this, actually what he was originally saying was probably right. And what we were doing was in fact not the right thing to do. And so we learned that too. But he never said, I told you so. That was one thing. And I think it helped us both also figure out our own way of working together. And this is what we now teach in family business. We teach this all the time. Our father had no exposure to that, but it is just something which he kind of observed and learned from his visits. He used to travel a lot overseas and learn good things, and he'd see what were all the bad things as well, which didn't work in companies. And he just had that wisdom to be able to implement some of that in terms of how he inducted us both into the business. So we were very fortunate. I would say that would be one of the main factors.
So you have, I think I can say safely that both of you have distinct and different personalities. How did you adapt roles and personalities, and how did that evolve? Was it something that your father did, that you all evolved?
No, very clear. I mean, you've met us both, and I think you will see that. And my colleagues here from Forbes Marshall would also agree, I'm sure.
I didn't look, but I'm sure there were a few smiles when I said that. So it is.
So definitely true. Let's put it this way. How did we start? So, the traditional way, and, we had issues in family businesses even at that time. And the traditional way of doing things was to actually give responsibilities to different people for different parts of the business.
to split up the business almost.
In a way, split up. And going to the other extreme of actually completely separating businesses, sometimes to the detriment of the business, and family relationships too. We can talk later about that. But in our case, I had a natural tendency and natural interest in the instrumentation part of the business. So we had two fields of work, even at that time. We had a steam business and we had an instrumentation business. And the instrumentation business was sort of naturally what I could directly add value on. And so I got involved more with that. And when Naushad came back, he got involved with the steam business. And what we still did, though, is that though we had kind of different groups of people who were working with us on these things, we had a lot of common things to do together. And those common things that we did together were all the common functions that you have, whether it's HR, whether it's finance, even sales, our sales approach, etc. Sales approach may have been a little different, but sales policy, in terms of how you compensated people, how you remunerated people, those were all common. So we would have a Monday meeting where both the groups got together. So Naushad and I would be there. At that time, our father and mother also participated. And then we would have our colleagues who were, responsible for different functions and different parts of the business operations also there. So we heard all the common issues too. It was not just that we were completely in our own, doing our own thing in our own areas. And that commonality kind of helped a great deal in terms of keeping things overall together. Okay? So that's what actually happened in terms of the actual operations. And then, of course, you have, naturally, as we are different people, and it's not just because you're different personalities, but you're different people, you're going to have different views. And one of the things Naushad and I did, and I think we were fortunate to do that, was that if we ever disagreed on something, if we had different views on something, that we learned to talk to one another first and get alignment between us on those issues before talking to others in the organization. You send a very confusing message. If you say something based on your opinion to someone, and if he were to say something different, okay, so what's right for them to actually carry forward? So we need to have understanding within the family on that. Okay, and that is one thing which we made a point to try and do. And earlier we would have areas where we would not quite align, but we would discuss it together. We might even bring in a colleague or two that I was working with or Naushad was working it, and then kind of resolve that between us. And it may be a bit more inefficient because it takes more time to get that consensus, but it's much more effective. And then later on, I knew how he thought, he knew how I thought, and we would both independently offer opinions on things which we felt were not super consequential, that we must talk first. And I said, I'm sure Naushad will think the same way. And I'll tell the person, I think. I haven't spoken with him, but I think he will agree with this. And then they go and talk to him, and I haven't even talked to him, and they get the same view. So you get to work together and you get your own alignment also very clear. In that.
No, and it's interesting that talk to each other first is simple, but it is profound actually. It's remarkable in how many, if I just look at the Tatas or, so many other stories that one hears, it is actually just that direct communication link breaking down that was at the root of a whole bunch of other things that happened after that.
Yeah, no, very true. And it's equally so for family business problems. It's because people don't talk about the issues and they don't bring the issues up on the table. And that's what we're trying to do with the next generation as well. So, that's something which we try and do.
So there's a related question on leadership, right? I have had the fortune of meeting your father once. And I think from all I have read and all I have heard, sometimes you take over from a leader who's close to legendary. I've had that happen to me once. There are a lot of people around you telling you those are very big shoes to fill.
Yeah.
You heard that quotation many times.
Sure.
How did you prepare for and handle that expectation?
Yeah. So I think this is a very important, it's a very generic question for family businesses in general. Okay. And I think there should not be, you have to diffuse an expectation that you have to fill those shoes. You fill those shoes in different ways. You will fill them, but you fill them in different ways. So one of the things that I have kind of seen and learned in family business is that each generation should enter the business in a different capacity, different way than the previous generation. And for two reasons. One is that the business is different, actually three reasons. Business is different for one. It's usually it's larger, it's more complex at the next generation level. Second, you're different personalities, you're different people. You have different competencies to handle things because you don't have the same history. There's no way, as I said, Naushad and I could have the same understanding of detail that our father did. So we had to rely much more on colleagues and others who knew much more about issues than we did. And the third thing is also that you have to have the expectation and diffuse expectations that others have that, no, this is how things were done before. So you have to actually observe, watch, understand the good things that have been done, all the benefits of what was mundane and the rigor which was in place to make those mundane things happen. But at the same time, use your knowledge, use your expertise, which the next generation, in our case, also has, to think about what needs to change. And then figure out how you do those changes in a manner which is, getting people on board, get buy-in to issues, and then make those changes. So I think you have to do both.
Yeah, and I think, it is different from family businesses, but a couple of things that I personally learned. One was just being secure in your own skin. It's just very, very important.
100%. You don't copy someone else's
style.
And
the second is that that whole statement itself is wrong because you are not stepping into anybody else's shoes. You are taking an organization forward. And you would much rather take over from a giant than a pygmy, right? If you want to take an organization forward. So I think once that clarity is there and then the carrying people along is...
And this is not just true for family leaders. This is true for any succession.
That's why it's relevant. I'm sure they will all go through this.
It happens in the same way. It does not mean that you have to do something the same way. You create your own, your style is different. Understand what are the good things, and then figure out how to do them, and understand what needs to change and figure out how to do those changes as well.
So I have one more kind of personal observation, and I think that this really, in my experiences with the Forbes family, this has been remarkable. I think both of you are really deeply and genuinely inclusive. That is so rare. It is I haven't experienced too much of it. How did that happen?
I mean, it's a good point to ask everyone in the family on this. But the way I would see it really is that firstly, some very good guidance we got first from our parents. I think in my case, because I'm married, I have a wife it has been extremely supportive, but also constructively critical. She's right brain, I'm left brain. So she has a different way of looking at things. But the value she adds is extremely valuable. And one of the good things also is that, we have learned to listen within the family to each other and to appreciate each other, all of us. And I think we meet regularly, we talk about things, and we disagree as well. And I think understanding points of view has been very instructive.
Mm-hmm.
And then you translate that into the work environment. And the work environment also, and I think this is where I think we have great advantages in a family business. Because when you learn how to manage these kind of things within the family, you apply those skills in the business. And the first thing you have to do is learn to listen to people. So you have to learn to listen in the family. You may not agree, but you learn to appreciate. And that's the same thing you do in business then. If you can apply that in business as well, that you learn to listen to a differing view. You think you know what the answer should be, and you should be open-minded enough to be and have the humility to even change your position if it's required. But you don't have to change your position in all cases. And you just learn to listen and disagree. And you can do things which are actually in line with what you were originally thinking and not what the other person was wanting to do. But the fact that you've listened makes the person much more comfortable in accepting when they go away from that meeting to accept that, okay, I didn't get what I was wanting, but I was heard. And I think that way that we have found that to be much more effective when you're trying to implement something. Different organizations have different kind of leadership and management styles. And there are some very hierarchical things that just because someone up at the top has said something, you do it, and maybe that's a more efficient, faster way of doing things. But I think from us, that would not work at Forbes Marshall. At Forbes Marshall, it has to be much more inclusive. It has to be much more consultative. Things don't get done as fast, but we think in the long run, you get further away. You may not get as fast to something, but you get further.
Also, there is this distinction between compliance and commitment, and I think commitment is. But I was coming to this other question that any leader, and particularly somebody who is also an owner of a business, and that's even more stressful in some ways, right? Because when the business is under stress, there are all the people you're responsible for also. The different roles that one plays in life: spouse, parent, business owner, leader. How has that evolved, and how have you balanced those roles?
Again, going back to our parents, and when we were sort of growing up, our father worked very hard, but he had a lot of time for us as well. So I think he played both roles. I think I see that very much in my wife as well, in Rati, in the sense that she actually spent a lot of time within the company as well on HR, and in fact, developing many of our HR systems in the early days. Because she was with me at Stanford when I did my master's in management. And that's when she developed her interest in HR as well. And she actually, helped a great deal there. And then I see how she handles her various community and social initiatives, and then the whole philanthropy as well. And at the same time, we do a lot in the family together, and in the family, with our two children, Ria's husband Aaron now, and with Naushad. And we make the point of, going on holidays together, short holidays. It could be a 4-day trip to the mountains in India. Just go to Mablesh, or not Mablesh, it's not a good example. You go
For one reason.
for one reason, yes, our son doesn't like it. So, but we've been to other places here. And sometimes when we are overseas, we do the same. But at the same time, we recognize our roles in the organization and we respect the roles that people have in the organization. And that's been a point of transition also now at the next stage, because with our two children and with Ria's husband, Aaron, we're figuring out that and in the process of doing that. And we're not there yet fully, but we're getting there.
The one question on the subject of parenting that I think is just timely. So congratulations on being a grandparent.
Thank you.
And
it's a new dimension to one's life.
How does it feel?
Oh, it feels wonderful. In fact, yesterday I was sitting with my granddaughter, and she will be 6 months in another 2 weeks. Yeah, another 2 weeks she'll be 6 months. And we've seen the change because Raki and I were there when she was born. And I spent some time with her at that time as well. And you see how every week there's a change, and certainly every month there's a huge change, So it's a new dimension to our lives. And I think Naushad also sees that as a grand uncle. And I think I can say the same for Rati as a grandmother too. So
I would always tell my dad that he was a far more liberal grandparent than he was a parent.
Well, our grandfather used to say that, your children are your investment and your grandchildren are your dividends. So you protect your investment, make sure that you do and nurture it, but enjoy your dividends.
So there are many grounds that I want to cover, but at some point I would also like to let the audience in. So I'll focus on 2 or 3 dimensions and then we'll go to questions. And Brajesh, you will remind me when you think that I've gone too far. But I think this is still going in a direction that will be engaging for the audience. I'll come to family business and your role as a leader and influencer in family business. But before that, there are many stories I've heard about different influences at Forbes Marshall, and some of those are different periods at Forbes Marshall. And some of those I think are useful. So for the group as a whole, tell us about COVID. How did Forbes Marshall deal with COVID? How did values manifest in crisis? What were the challenges you faced?
I think you mentioned about when you have a crisis, how does the organization respond? And this is where I feel that, this inclusivity, this shared vision really comes to the fore when you have a crisis. And COVID was a crisis for the world, and certainly, definitely very much so in India. And when we closed down on the 20th of March, 2020, I think it was, right? 19th of March or so. It was a real shock for everyone, for the organization as a whole. And we decided at that time that we should find a way to engage with people as much as possible. So we started this process of having a management call every morning at 9 o'clock. And almost everyone from Forbes Marshall who's here would be part of that call. And we would do a couple of things. The first thing is we would talk about health. firstly, in the early days, there was just complete ignorance about everything and a lot of fear that what's happening, So we got our company doctor, to also be on the call. And first, he would he would explain what he knew about COVID. And we did that often through the whole period because it was evolving so much. Knowledge was also changing and evolving. And initially, of course, no one is infected. So you just are dealing with how to stay safe based on knowledge there. And then we also focused on, because we were not invoicing, we could not supply materials because the factory was closed. India was one of the only countries where they actually stopped manufacturing. But we had a lot which was already supplied to customers. And so we would start with collections because that's the oil and the fuel which keeps the business going. So we would start with that. And Dharmesh, sitting here, even till today, starts with collections. Even today, we've continued this call. And we would talk about collections. We would talk about, obviously, no sales were happening during that period. But once we opened, we could start selling again. And the third thing then, of course, was orders. And orders, we were very fortunate. And because we all collectively got together, and two of our sales colleagues three of them are here, I think, and four of them. And they would talk about how they were engaging with customers in the early days of Zoom, using mobile phones, and because customers were also working in the same way. And we actually would track orders that were coming in even during this period. And that was a great sense of, accomplishment. So that was one thing on the business side. But as the pandemic progressed and people started falling sick, the first thing we would start with on the call was how many cases affected us directly, meaning how many employees, and we would talk about family members as well. And what needed to be done for those family members too. Okay? So when we were allowed to start opening and start working, we created, the only way we could do that was to have the manufacturing members actually stay in the facility. That was how we were able to start functioning. So we created dormitories. We had a training center at one of our locations. We created dormitories there. We put in showers in the restrooms. And we had people who would actually go in and spend 10 days, I think, at a time, be there, and then they would go back home and they would be relieved by others who would come in. And one of the things we also made sure we did, and it was something right at the start, because we obviously, like many companies, have people who are service providers. And these service providers employ people who really have no
alternative income
and no security or safety net. And so we would make sure that all our security staff, our canteen staff, the contracts, they were paid. But we went one step beyond that. And we made sure that those contractors paid their people as well. We had many of our canteen staff who were from Bihar and from, UP and all. And we made them stay. They slept in the canteen. They stayed there. And we made sure that all of them were also paid. And if there was illness, if there was any problem, making sure that we understood what the problems were. So our HR team and we have our own in-house Medicare, our Medicare facility. They did a fantastic job at that time in terms of this entire engagement with not just our own ecosystem, but with some of the, support staff as well. And then when we had crisis in Delhi and, trying to even locate hospital beds, ICU beds for our members and family members as well. That was all part of something which we felt that we needed to do. But this is where that inclusivity plays a huge part in how people respond. And people were doing this not because they were told to do. They did it because they felt it was the right thing to do. And they did it by themselves.
Yeah, and everybody wants to be part of something larger, something meaningful. Naushad was telling me a story about people washing cars today. That you all supported the people who are washing the cars.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
How did you think of that?
Well, these are people who needed to be supported, right? So.
Yeah, but where does that level of awareness come from? Because, I can understand you think of service people, but to go to the point where you're able to see there's somebody who's washing my car.
Yeah, because they're part of your ecosystem. They're part of your ecosystem, right? So, we should not make a difference between this person's an employee.
No,
this person,
I'm not even saying that, but I think just to have that deep concern itself is fairly inspiring.
I think you need to look at people who need the help, right? So, and actually they are the people who need the help the most, really, in some ways.
Also, the ability, I think, to see everybody as an individual, and I think the moment you do that, this awareness will just come. I'm going to change tack briefly. Talk to us about family business, and we've done some interactions, and I think you have a lot of wisdom on what family businesses need to do to move to the next level. What do you think are some of the challenges facing family businesses in India and across the world? And what are you trying to do to help them move and grow?
I think family businesses all over the world play a very significant role. And I think one of the things that we've been fortunate is that we've been exposed to good family business education. And a lot of my knowledge about it and appreciation about it. And I think it speaks more widely within our family, comes from an exposure which we've had through CII initially. CII had a family business annual program which they used to run. And they ran this with a professor from the US, a person by the name of John Ward. And he's quite an authority. He was the authority.
He was at Michigan at some point.
He was actually at Kellogg. He was at Kellogg. And he would come for those programs, and he did it for 14 years and 14 consecutive years before he retired. And I learned so much from him from that. And I think our family also learned. And then we got to know him as a real friend and as a person who we all appreciated and respected. And he was one of, you was asking about mentors and people like that. He was one of my mentors on family business. And he did a couple of things besides providing very practical insights on family business education, and what you needed to do as much for the family as for the business. Because in family business, you have the complexity of running a successful business. You have to do all the things that a successful business needs to do. But you also need to learn how to manage the family and the family relationship to the business. And that's where things do not work out often, because people don't spend enough time managing the family. They spend a huge amount of time managing the business, doing all the right things for the business, but they ignore the importance of spending time on what are the family issues that you need to work out. And that's what we call family governance. We've sort of kind of coined that term, family governance. So educating people about family governance, I think, is one of the most critical things all over the world. I think they do it better in some places than others. And I think in India, we need to learn this more, and the importance of investing time in your own education for this. And very often you run into families who say, well, we have no problems. We don't have any issues. And that's the time when you should be investing in this. Because when you do have problems, it's already too late. You can't sort out family issues in a court of law. And when you read about things that, it's now, someone's suing somebody and the mother is suing the son and the son is suing the mother and another brother or sister or whatever, you can't resolve things. The only way that gets resolved finally, that there's a court order which nobody likes, it doesn't certainly help the relationship, and it probably doesn't help the business as well. And I think that's the kind of thing that getting people to appreciate what are the things that they need to spend time on. That today we are fortunate that we have the ability to have education available for us. And there's knowledge in the space. There's experience, and there are networks where you can share this knowledge and learning, not only with academics, but with other families who are going through the same issues. And these are the things which I've really learned to appreciate in the global context, that no matter where you are, the issues are in family businesses are much the same. There are certain cultural dimensions which are different, but the issues are the same. And you can learn from others who've successfully done things and learn from others who sadly have not, and learn from the mistakes as well.
So when it comes to Indian family businesses looking to grow, let's say from a medium scale to a larger scale, what do you think are some of the challenges they face, both with growth as well as with managing the family?
Yeah, I think you keep talking about professionalizing a business. And when we talk of professionalizing a business, we often have a misconception that to professionalize a business means having a non-family professional. Yeah?
Very good.
I think a family member can be equally professional. And when we talk of professionalization in that context, is how do you make the family member function in a business thoroughly professionally? How do you get the family members to interact with non-family in a manner where, just the fact that you're from the family, it creates there's a certain dimension to that which you cannot ignore. Yeah. And it's something where you have to handle that extremely sensitively. You have to create an environment where your non-family executives can feel comfortable to disagree, and that you invite that disagreement. Because in our culture in India, particularly, to challenge authority, and I'm associating authority with the fact that with ownership.
Yeah.
Okay. So you have to work hard at doing that and being able to get people to open up, get people to say what they feel, what they believe, and still give them the space to do things. And then you've got to, within the family, sort things out there too. You've got to have alignment of values, and a lot of the disagreements which you read about comes about because of misalignment of values. So it helps a great deal if your previous generations kind of imbibe the same values and you share similar values. You may be different. You may want different things, but you try, and we've tried to do the same in our family too, So you get to do those kind of things, and it's important to do those things. And that's when you can successfully transition to the next generation. And we can learn, and you have European family businesses which have figured this out better. Not to say that they have no problems. They have plenty of problems. But they've figured out a way to. That's why you have 6 generations, 7 generations, 8 generations. In Japan, we've met families who are 12 generations, 18 generations, 30 generations, We're figuring it out here in India still. And not that we're not, but we are figuring it out. And what we're trying to also do is get family businesses to realize that invest in your education, you can avoid problems in future, and then you do not need to split businesses. Because a lot of families we are seeing in India, they split their businesses even when there are no problems, because the senior generation says, no, if we don't split it, we're going to see problems in the future. I want to avoid problems. And so they split the business. And we know we have friends who've done this. And that does not solve family relationships, sadly, because when you split something, you're going to create some degree of dissatisfaction in some branch of the family or the other, So rather than that, if you can invest in your education such that you figure out how to work things out, and if splitting the business is the right decision, do it. But it should be done for the right business reason, not the family reason. What's right for the business?
So I had the opportunity to head an institute which had a family business program, and I would speak to roughly 240 family business second generation. I mean, not second generation, it was the child who would come into the business, and I would speak to them for at least 15 to 20 hours. I would teach, but I would also address the convocations, go in for some sessions, etc. And there was 3 or 4 issues. These were all businesses in the 10 to 100 crore kind of range. Occasionally you would get a Haldiram and somebody else, but largely 10 to 100 crores. So 3 or 4 issues I saw. One was that the child often wanted to take the business in a dramatically different direction from the parent. And often that direction need not even be substantive. It may be a little superficially driven, but that was an issue. Their ability to talk frankly to their parent was a huge issue. It was a huge issue. And the third is a point that you made, which actually I used to make very often to them, which was this idea of what is a professional. Having an MBA does not make you a professional. Do not confuse degrees with behavior, right? So to me, professionalism is how do you take decisions? That you take decisions based on the merit of the situation. How do you promote people? And how do you deal with human beings? They don't always get it. Because I think your notion of a professional itself was a bit of an issue. So, any perspective on how one helps families who are at this stage where there is a fourth issue which they simply did not look at their daughters in the same way as they looked at their sons.
Totally valid. And I think, having been in so many programs now in family business in India, elsewhere too, and I see differences and some similarities also, depending on which culture and which country. Big problem here is exactly what you said. We get at our programs lots of really bright next-gen members wanting to do things. They've been educated overseas. They've had very good, competencies which they have developed, technical competencies, not necessarily experience and behavioral. But they've learned. And they all have problems saying, listen, how do I get my senior generation who comes from a very different cultural background to what I've been exposed, to accept? And these are the founder entrepreneurs or maybe second gen, but, of a certain age, where it's very difficult to get them to kind of accept these ideas. Yet they want to put their next gens in these positions to lead the business and say, go and try and do this, do it. But they don't give them the space. And one of our challenges, and what we're being somewhat successful, is usually when the next gen comes alone the first time, we say, next time, bring your father or uncle, or in some cases, mother or aunt or somebody who's running the business. Bring them with you, and then we make an approach to them as well. And we've had success with that. Not in, I would say, in a few cases. And when those senior gens come with the next gen, and they sit across a table and they're meeting some other next gen member and that next gen member is talking about what they've done in her case or his case, this person listens and hears. And if there's another senior gen person, they talk to one another, and there's appreciation and understanding. So I think that's a way to do it. And your point about the daughters, I'll tell you, in 2019, we had a global FBN summit in India, in Udaipur. And I made, when I was, so deeply involved with the organization, I went around the country to make some roadshows, about what we were trying to achieve there. And I went to this program in Calcutta. There were about 150 people in the room. And we talked about, and we had the Professor Morissetti from Bocconi University who was coming to Udaipur as well. He was with me, and we talked about one or two issues about family business. And then back of the room, this young woman puts her hand up and says, can you tell me how I can break into this old boys club? And she said, and then she mentioned, saying that, I have had my education. I've started working in my family business, but how I'm treated in my family business is totally different to how the male members are. And you don't have a solution to offer. All you can say is that, because we don't really, each family has to figure this out for themselves. We cannot be prescriptive and tell them that, no, listen, these are all the good things you need to do. But we need to get the family to figure it out for themselves. And that's what we sort of explain, saying, listen, your point is absolutely valid. We may fully agree with you, but unfortunately, we can't offer a solution. And the solution has to evolve from within. It has to evolve from within the family. Our Calcutta family business group for CIFBN now is a very dynamic group. And they've been having programs. Of course, during COVID, it was online. But then post-COVID, they've been having these things regularly there. I didn't go to the one last year. I went to the one the year before. And at that time in Calcutta, you have a lot of Marwari family businesses. So initially, there were mainly Marwari family businesses which would come to the program. But year before last, they were all Bengali family businesses. And it was so heartening to see that in almost every session, it was the women who were on the stage. So it just shows how even there, it's evolving. And it's evolving in India. We're seeing more and more women now coming into the family business, that they are having positions in the family business and even ownership, and moving away from this concept that, as a daughter, you marry into your husband's family business and participate over there. But it's changing now.
It's been a fascinating conversation. I'd like to come back at the end for 2 or 3 questions, but we'll open to the audience. Just put up your hand, Brajesh will recognize, and then. So Brajesh gets to arbiter who asked the question.
I'm with Thermax. I have worked with many companies, public sectors, private companies, large companies, small companies, and now I'm with termites. And this is probably the first time I visited your office, going with termites and non termites and Forbes Marshall work very closely. It was a very rich experience for me to see the culture that you have been training in the organization. And of course, you heard about it a lot. The very open culture, the kind of inclusive approach you have, and you talked about a lot about that. But how do you maintain that? There's so much competition out there. There's the priorities of companies are quarterly results and everyday priorities, and I see that companies don't have patience for employees and the results and things get into different kind of dimensions nowadays. This cutthroat competition. So what's the way in which you have been able to consistently maintain that over the existence of Forbes Marshall?
I think if you see your people policies, firstly, if you see your people as being the source of your prime source of competitive advantage in pure management jargon terms, okay, then you'll make sure you have people policies which are aligned to that. And you do the best. I'm not saying we do it perfectly at all. We make lots of mistakes. And we may even say this, but we sometimes don't always adhere to it. But by and large, if you can ensure that you follow those people policies, you can make this a source of competitive advantage. And it's how your people respond in all circumstances. What's right for the long term? And what's right for the long term may have a short, maybe a very temporary effect on the short term, but not in the medium term. So I think getting that across and always making sure that you're doing things which are never against. That means if something which will benefit immediate short term, but is not aligned with your values, not aligned with how you should respect people, treat people, empower people, then it's probably not the right thing to do. And I think you make it clear. And the message from the top is very important, that everyone sees that. Yes, of course, results are important, and you have to create that sense of accountability. And that's one of the things that we also struggle with some, that how do you bring about accountability? But you bring about accountability, making sure that that's communicated. We have a value, one of our values, you may have seen it up on the boards as well, is family spirit. Now, when you think of family spirit, you think about this mushy thing, which is, paternalistic or maternalistic or whatever, that you take care of everyone. Yes, you take care of everyone. But as part of family spirit, you have the responsibility to see that you perform in the family. And I say the family, I mean the broader organizational family. And in that, you have a role. And if you don't fulfill your role, then you're letting the family down, just as you would in your own family at home. So that's the kind of messaging which has to be brought across and which you bring across, with new employees who join, and then you have to keep reinforcing this as well. I think that's the way we approach it. It helps to some extent for us that we're not listed. We do not have to satisfy an analyst every quarter. So it helps in some ways for that. But I think even in listed firms, and Thermax is a prime example of that, where family values do actually play a very significant part in the culture of the organization. And I think what the family does, and we know the family well, they're good friends of ours, and we know what they do and what they stand for. And I think it can help even in the listed company scenario.
So my name is Naufal. I'm from Tata Electronics. So after several years of outside India, Hong Kong, then I come back to join Tata Electronics. It's probably the city, but large semiconductor factory. So today during the tour, I just observed a farmer, Farhad Forbes, did a schooling in Chennai.
Yes.
And also went to college, London College, right, on Prince Edmund.
Right.
And that, I also noted that he is very much invested to be a lawyer. So, agriculture, even force all of you to become a lawyer.
Yeah, actually, his father was a lawyer.
Yeah.
And
All his uncles.
And his uncles, his father's brothers were all lawyers also, So I think this is, I think, what Ranjan, you started with. So many things happen by chance, serendipity, right? They just happen by chance. And I think he got associated with his uncle. That was actually our grandfather, Mr. J.N. Marshall, because our mother and father were first cousins. And when he, after his engineering, he actually joined our grandfather. Our grandfather was in the trading business. Okay. And, actually our father's family, his parents, his father was a lawyer. They were not super well-to-do, but middle-class family, very sound values. And he had to start earning as well. And so he worked with his uncle. And by chance again, at that time, one of our joint venture partners, who today we don't have a joint venture with, were looking at entering India. And so he was motivated by that because the whole concept of energy conservation, which even till today is our kind of one of our prime driving impactful areas, started with that. And as a young professional working in starting his professional career, this resonated with him. And so he didn't have any feeling of, that he was doing something wrong. Our mother would always say that he can argue anyone under the table. And probably that comes from his, he would have made a good lawyer, perhaps. But he never influenced us to do engineering or law or anything like that. He sort of said you should do what you want to do and what you're passionate about.
And I think Naushad has many times, if you ask him about anything that's in any statute, he'll say, let's go back to the original paper and read that original paper.
Yes,
so that
yes, very much. Attention to detail.
All the Forbes Marshall people will relate to this, I think. Yes.
Geeks are slightly Cambridge. It was just extremely meditative listening to you with so much of clarity, every word being chosen by you and really so much to reflect. Just one very simple question. If you were to relive your life once again, what would you, if at all, do differently?
I look at it very much that I've been a very fortunate person. So I'm not sure I would want to change very much, if I can answer that way. I wouldn't want to change what my parents did. I wouldn't want to change the opportunities they provided. I wouldn't want to change the education I was so fortunate to have, this wonderful education. And I have such a wonderful family even today. So what's there to change in that? Honestly, I think you should be satisfied with what you have and make the best of it and be as impactful with whatever you have. rather than aspiring for a lot of things to be done differently. Yes, behavioral things, we've all made mistakes. And in hindsight, I would say, yeah, if I were to do something different, if I had that same circumstance, that same situation, I would have done it differently. Okay, I should have done it differently. But in the overall context of things, I don't think I would want to change anything.
Any other questions? Please.
On about fraternal conflict, right? Very inspiring and humbling experience and a lot of leadership positions in last 1 hour or so. And the last line especially, like, take like credit now. And David, Rajan, my question is like, when we visited today in Forbes Marshall, and we saw a lot of colleagues who were doing the anti-W poll.
Yes.
We say very young photos of them. Right? So I think in today's world, if you look at that, people are not that patient. And we have also learned that in company, incentive should not be given to the people. Like, you should not show the carrot, right? Over the period of time, you will do this and that, right? So how you maintain the attrition and continue to like invite the long-term thinking, even try and relate with the purpose and having patience with like see those career within the company.
Well, one thing is, yes, the people in the photos are young photos. So one way to look at it is that the company has really aged them. If you see that they're very different. So, but hopefully aged in for the right reasons, But it's not that we don't struggle with attrition. We have attrition issues to deal with. Do we have more or... I think we have... You have to look at it, benchmark yourself to other industries in your kind of field of work. And I wouldn't say we're the best, but we certainly are not the worst in that area. And I think if you can provide people with a sense of purpose, what the organization stands for, you try and make sure that you live your values. The people are clear. You try and live your values in your interactions. And you also still create that sense of aspiration for success. But you don't make that your sole objective. You let success follow by doing good things, doing the right things. And the right things in all ways, not just for the business, your immediate department, your immediate business unit, or even just your company, but also for the environment around you. You share that vision. You make sure that that's understood, that they see that there's, as part of the purpose of the company, it's to make the world a better place. And in that, you're contributing to the community. And that's one of the, if you do some of these employee surveys, one of the things that comes across all the time in these great place to work surveys, etc., which we participate in, is that people are so proud of what the organization is doing for its community. And not just now in India, but as we go overseas as well, we're doing things overseas as well. And as a result, people identify with that and they feel this is a good thing to do. And there's a sense of purpose then for them as well.
Thank you, John. Is this a pen in your shirt?
Yeah. No, this is the microphone.
That's the mic. The mic, yes. And then there's a pen.
And there's a pen, yes. Yeah.
There is. I noticed in Naushad also have a pen. And I also noticed 40 years old Naushad, I think also the picture, having the pen same place. Is there any
So, I mean, it's from college days. I mean, I had to carry a pen, right? So I had to put my pen somewhere. And I used to stick it here. It used to first be in my pocket here. But then as you start wearing shirts which don't have pockets, then you have to put it somewhere else. And then you forget that, this shirt doesn't have a pocket and this shirt does have a pocket. And as a result, then this is always universal. It always works.
But you get a special mention for implementing the observation and questioning session really, really well.
1986 photo also.
Yeah.
Hi, Pran.
Maybe right forum to ask this question because I don't know the story. So, when you met Rati ma'am and you just...
Yeah, I wanted to go there and I said,
Question.
yeah.
But this is a question where you have to ask both sides the story, because otherwise you'll get my side of the story. But I can tell you my side of the story. So, Rati used to work for Swiss Air. That time it was Swiss Air. It was not Swiss International Airlines. This is before Swiss Air went bankrupt. And she used to work in the town office in the ground. And she was, in those days, you didn't have computers working out fares. And you had very smart people who could do that. And she was one of them, because they were extremely complicated things when you had tickets with multiple stops and all. And so she used to do this in the office in Bombay. And our parents and Naushad and I were making a trip, which was to the US. And then that was a time when we also went to South America. And it was a fairly complicated ticket. So my father and I had gone to Swiss Air to get this ticket worked out and all. And I met Rati there, and she was the one working on it. And we knew of each other because her cousins were neighbors of ours in Bombay when we were living in Bombay. And also her mother was our pediatrician when we were kids. But we didn't have much contact with Rati and her family. Rati's father, who was actually quite an eminent business person, he was the first commerce minister in India. And in the transition government, when, India achieved independence, and then was a business person who started many entities. And our grandfather knew him as well. So the families knew each other. And her brother was in class with me for, I think, 1 or 2 years when we were in school in Bombay as well. So we knew each other. And then on that same trip, we were coming back to India. So we took a flight from New York to Zurich. And I had a friend of the family, their son was coming to India with us. And he was sitting next to Rati. And Rati was on that same flight because she was visiting her parents who were in London. So we met in Zurich at the airport. And of course, we recognized each other and, we chatted. And then Danny was sitting next to Rati. And so after we took off, I came back and, to see how Danny was. And then we were talking and, Rati's cousin and, and good friend of Naushad's as well. And we were chatting about things. And then, of course, when we arrived in India, Rati gave me her card, her visiting card. And I said, fine, we'll be in touch. And Danny decided after he had one of these tickets which had a minimum stay in India, and he wanted to go back sooner. He wanted to go back early. And under normal circumstances, he could not change his ticket to go back. So I said, well, I've got Rati's card. Let me see. I'll call her. So I phoned her. And her words were, I think we can fix it, you know. So I said, fine, great, and sure enough, she did. She fixes a lot of things. So, yeah, in the right way. And then, of course, so Danny could go back early. And so I went to Bombay to drop him. And then I spoke to Rati and I thanked her and all as well. And I said, why don't you join us for dinner? So that's how it started. Now you can ask her and maybe she has a different dimension.
We'll have another conversation for that.
Last question.
Yeah, and then I have a couple. Yeah, some of mine also got answered. So
Hi.
okay, that's good.
My name is Riyad Forbes. And for full disclosure, I had some time to work with, spend some time with Farhad both professionally and personally. I guess my question to you that is, does people get very wrong? I might hear them say that they're quite comfortable. They know who they are and they don't really they know who they are, they don't really need to change. For you, I feel in your style like open to learning. You still see a lot of value in learning. You're very curious. And you're very willing to change your mind. To learn more about the world and about yourself. Where do you think that comes from? And why is learning still so important to you?
So I think, again, family played a big role in being open to learning. Our father always encouraged us to keep learning. He really valued that. And we could see it in him that he was doing this right through his life. So that's one. Second thing is, if I look at my business school experience, I think the most impactful courses for me were the ones which were improving my own self skills. So whether it was a course to understand, we had a course called interpersonal dynamics, which you took also. I think that was the most impactful course because it actually helped focus how you come across to people and how you need to actually keep this thing of curiosity and learning, constant learning, open. And also to listen critically. And then listening critically means also accepting a view which may disagree, which you may not fully have thought about and agree with. So hearing that and listening and then being able to also understand in a kind of T group how you actually accept an idea, how you don't accept an idea, you learn from that. So I think these were two things. And then actual experience, when you're actually doing things and you see the merit of it as well. So I think that's something which has to happen in us to be fully effective too. And this thing of curiosity is what I would like to see in Nayanta, that leaders who come out from here always have that ability to be curious and constantly question and to have the humility to also understand that I don't have all the answers.
So actually, that's two of my questions gone. One was about what is your aspiration for Nayanta, and the second, which was the Charles Andy question, which is what is the purpose of a business in the larger thing. So I have two, and the first one is a simple question. When you came into this conversation, there were things you wanted to speak about. You would have had in your mind. Is there something you wanted to share which I have not asked you?
No, I think we've dealt with most issues. I think almost all the issues.
Is there anything you'd want to cover or share which?
Not really. If I think of anything.
I did have a question, and I because I am hesitate to ask it. because there's a judgment in the question, and I've just told 30 people that you should not have judgment in your questions. I feel your need for limelight is very low. You don't need to be in the public eye at all. I mean, you're just happy with contribution, and it doesn't matter. It's not that you can't handle the limelight, but you don't have any need for it. I could be wrong, but if so, it's a very remarkable quality. How do you cultivate?
Yeah, I've always believed that you let your work speak for yourself. Let your work speak for itself. Okay, as number one, and you earn all the limelight you need from that. So from my perspective, I'm perfectly happy with that. It's if you ask me, one of the things that you said, what I had not spoken about and what I thought I would say is, if you had asked me on some of the family business issues, you see, in family business, you have family businesses which are different also. But by and large, if I see the really long-lasting, old, successful family businesses elsewhere in the world as well, they've always been kind of low-key. Yeah. There are exceptions, of course, and you see it a lot now around us too. But by and large, if you take the sheer number, the total number, they are pretty well low-key. And you let the work speak for itself. And that's one of the challenges which we're having in family business in terms of the projection of family business as a model for society. And particularly in the Anglo-Saxon world, family businesses have not traditionally had a very strong appreciation. And that's something I think we need to rightfully change. And I asked John Ward this question in one of my early family business programs, which I attended. And I said, one of the things that you're doing for us is creating a sense of appreciation of family business being a good model for society. It's not what you get in business school, at least in many of the Anglo-Saxon business schools, at least at that time. Maybe it's changing a bit now. I'm not so sure. But we don't hear all the positives of what family businesses stand for. And for that, we need to have a little more visual depiction of this. So we need to actually speak up. And one of the things that we've done now, when I was also involved with the FBN organization, is that we've made advocacy now for family business one of our pillars that we need to actually speak about, so that society more widely, the media, etc., the governments also have an appreciation for the value of family businesses in terms of what they contribute to society.
So Ria's spoken to you about learning, and perhaps that's the Nayanta question is a good way to close this.
Curiosity, creating curious leaders.
And curiosity. So what do you read? How do you stay in touch with the world?
So read, I'm not as prolific a reader as Naushad is, nor my daughter is, but I do read. I enjoy reading, okay? And I read a fair amount on family business because there are lots of things written on it. I try and read The Economist every week, as much of it as possible.
That's like a family magazine, I think.
Yeah, I think it is. So I read that. And right now, I'm reading chapters of a book. In fact, it's on my desk just now, on family dynasties, which Naushad gave me, by David Landis. And you learn about, and it's written in a very nice style where he talks about family. It's talking about the fortunes and misfortunes of family businesses, in different sectors. And this is an old book, actually. It's not a relatively new book. And then we go to the Jaipur Literature Festival, And so we always learn about one or two new books. And so I have a couple which I picked up from there. And then I read P.G. Wodehouse every night.
Every night.
Every night before going to sleep. Because it puts me in a good mood. And I started this during the pandemic.
That is so interesting.
It really helped me, put me to sleep. Because, there was so much kind of turmoil and worry and concern, and you hear about people not being sick, and you hear about people not surviving and all. And I said, I need to read something happy and which will make me laugh. And so I read a chapter or I read a few pages and then fall asleep.
So on that very happy note, let me thank you for a very deep, reflective conversation. Thank you so much.
Thank you.